Thank you, Albert. Um, Good afternoon. This is Hora de Peligro. You know what that means? It means dangerous hour. Because this is the time of day when, after having a good lunch, everybody wants a siesta. Siesta in Spanish is a nap, no? But I hope that the excitement of hearing this research will not make you fall asleep. But anyway, let me present to you the results of the integrative research of the poverty reduction and women economic leadership of the topic poverty reduction and women economic leadership, roles, potentials, and challenges of social enterprises in Asia. As Albert was talking about, this is a joint project between Oxfam and ISEA. But I would like to recognize before my presentation the research teams in the different countries that made this research possible. In Bangladesh, we actually partnered with Development Wheel, and with us here is Ainun Nahar. Please. In Indonesia, we partnered with Perkumpulan Prakarsa. Did I say that right? Yeah. And with us is Victoria Fanjide. That's it, Indonesia. In the Philippines, of course, the Institute for Social Entrepreneurship in Asia did the research, and the lead and our senior research associate who worked with us to do the research is Meldy Pelejo. Meldy, are you around? Yeah. So the integrative research that I'm going to be presenting to you is on the. You heard about the country reports, no, this morning. If you were in the if you're in the session where the report on India was made, that is actually just a segment of a report. But Dr. Sukhpal Singh from IIM Ahmedabad agreed to present the research results from his own research. No? So this is not part of the research, just so to explain. Because we thought that producer companies, research on producer companies could actually contribute to the discourse. But our research in India is still upcoming, and that's being done by Tata Dan Academy. No? But it will be part of the overall research once this whole thing is done. So Tata Dan Academy is doing the other segment in India, but it's unfinished. That's why it's not included in this integrative research. So I'm a techno peasant, so I don't know what. Ayan, okay. So may I share with you first the research framework and methodology that we used? I went to the 2 workshop groups, and I think there were a lot of questions about methodology as well. But the most important thing to point out, I think, is there were 3 main analytical tools that we used for this research. The first is the concept of social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders. No? We did not do a research on all social enterprises. We focused our research on social enterprises that engage the poor. And the specific definition that we used for this is that they are social mission driven. Their main mission is poverty reduction or poverty alleviation. They're wealth creating organizations. And they have a distributive enterprise philosophy, meaning to say they're like NGOs because they're social mission driven. They're like businesses because they're wealth creating. But unlike businesses, they create wealth and distribute the wealth that they create to the poor who are their primary stakeholders. So that's the definition of social enterprises that we used to choose the key informant interviews and to choose the sample also that we came up with. The second analytical tool is women economic leadership. This is a concept from Oxfam. And women economic leadership is about women gaining economic and social power to move out of poverty. And it has 3 main elements: securing economic resources, gaining power in markets, and changing attitudes and beliefs, no? So that men and women can have equal relations in economic decision making. No? So that's the second analytical tool. The third analytical tool is is the concept of a plural economy. This is a popular concept in Europe as well as in Latin America. And the economy is not seen just as equal to the market. I think in the Philippines, where we are very influenced by the American school of thought, because we were a colony of the US. And for some of us who are more exposed to the dominant tradition that the market equals the economy, in this research, we used the concept of a plural economy as analytical tool, that the economy is really characterized by various forms of exchange. The first is the principle, governed by the principle of market, where there's trade through price setting. No? So that's what happens in the market. There's trade through price setting. But there are two other forms of exchange that happen in the economy that are equally happening, no? That are happening at the same time as there are market exchanges. That is redistribution, which is defined as a part of production is handed over to a central authority, usually the state, responsible for distributing it. Now, so this concept is that the state is supposed to be responsible for redistributing wealth, no, in society. But we will find out that actually social enterprises are actually performing this role as well. The other concept is reciprocity, when this is mutual help and voluntary complementation and interdependence. Just so, when cooperatives, no? Many of us are familiar with cooperatives. When cooperatives decide to form an organization and help each other to meet a mutual need, no? It is not moved by market principles. It is moved by the principle of reciprocity. So this is the concept of the plural economy, therefore, is composed not only of a market economy, but there's another sphere of the economy called the social economy, which is governed by redistribution and reciprocity as principles. No? So these are the three main analytical tools that we used. In terms of the main research question, among social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders, what are their strengths, opportunities, and challenges to emerge as a significant sector and player in accelerating poverty reduction and women economic empowerment in Asia? So that was the main research question. So in terms of methodology, the original time frame was August 2013 to March 2014, but it really went beyond that, especially in terms of when we did the analysis part. But there was a rapid appraisal where we did secondary research and key informant interviews to actually try to make sense of the state of social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders in the different countries. And then we did, from the rapid appraisal, we identified which social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders would be part of the sample. No? And so the sample was a sample that was recommended by key informants, no, in the sector. So the survey was meant to be a purposive sample of 60 social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders that should have existed for more than 5 years. And so they are relatively developed. No? And then, but in reality, of course, after the survey, we were supposed to have additional key informant interviews, and then we were supposed to do 5 caselets. In reality, this became a very ambitious undertaking. No? So we planned to do all that, but in reality, as has been explained this morning, it proved to be too ambitious given that resources, time frame, and differentiated appreciation and familiarity, even of the research teams with social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders, as a segment of social enterprises in their respective countries. At the same time, the survey became the operational focus because just conducting the survey and integrating the data from the survey and analyzing the research, analyzing the data coming out of the survey was a very tedious task. And it became the operational focus, and this affected the nature, the number, the geographic reach, and the mix of social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders in the sample. And it also affected the quality of the caselets. So if you look at the caselets are usually about the qualitative part, no, of the research. But because of the focus on the survey, we were not able to do additional key informant interviews for most of the caselets. And so the caselets did not really have much more input than what were gotten from the survey and some short interviews with stakeholders. Okay. Now, this is the resulting sample across the countries. No? So we planned 60 SEPs, no? 60 developed SEPs, social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders in the 3 countries. But this is what happened to the sample. The sample is composed, in reality, of evolving and developed SEPs. No? So in the Philippines, the sample of social enterprises, SEPs we were able to get were 10 to less than 20 years old. They cut across 5 types of social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders. But the good thing is, it's Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao. No? So there was a good cross-section across the country and a good mix of types. The types of social enterprises that came out to be relevant were social mission-driven microfinance institutions, social cooperatives, fair trade organizations, trading development organizations. Now, these are NGOs serving specific poverty sectors, and they're doing trading to help, or corporations that were actually established or bought up by foundations or NGOs in order to serve poverty groups. No? And then what we call new generation social enterprises. These are social enterprises that were set up by young professionals, by entrepreneurs with a social mission. No? So that's the nature of the Philippine sample. And when we looked at the nature of the sample that we were able to cull, there were only 32. No? We only reached 32 because we were quite selective. But it became a purposive sample of developed SEPs in the Philippines. No? When we actually studied this sample, 62% of them claimed that they had developed models already of social enterprise. No? However, in Bangladesh and Indonesia, in terms of number, we were able to get the number. No? In Bangladesh, we were able to get 60. In Indonesia, we were able to get 59. But in terms of the nature of the sample, in Bangladesh, the age was 15 to less than 25 years, so quite old SEPs also. But majority were SEPs that were engaged in trade of handicrafts. And it was a referral sample of evolving social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders, mainly in the trade of handicrafts in Bangladesh. No? So that was the nature of the sample. 74% of the sample said that their social enterprise model was still evolving. No? So majority were saying that they're still evolving. In Indonesia, it was focused on limited to Metro Jakarta, and a big number were involved in microfinance, 5 to less than 10 years. And it became a referral sample of evolving SEPs in urban and peri-urban Indonesia. And 71% of the sample said they were still evolving, no, their social enterprise model. No? So this is the reality is the Bangladesh and Indonesia sample were evolving SEPs, and they were more focused on specific segments of social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders, trade in crafts in Bangladesh, and microfinance in Indonesia. Whereas in the Philippines, it was a sample of developed SEPs, and although it was only 32, it was significant because it cut across 5 major types of social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders. No? So that's the nature of the sample. The main findings now, may I go to that? So, of course, the main finding is that SEPs is a relevant segment of social enterprises in developing countries. No? Let us go to the details of that finding. Yan. Social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders are social mission-driven organizations with poverty reduction, alleviation, and empowerment of the poor as explicit objective. And you see this very clearly in the mission statements of the various social enterprises. For example, in Alter Trade Foundation, they talk about alleviating poverty in marginal communities. In CARD, mutually reinforcing institutions, they talk about empower socially and economically challenged men and women and their families. In Arong in Bangladesh, they talk about bringing about positive changes in the lives of disadvantaged artisans and underprivileged rural women. And Tarango in Bangladesh talks about a poverty-free society through women's empowerment. And in Mitra Business Keluarga in Indonesia, they talk about fighting poverty and empowering women from the bottom 25% of the households in Indonesia. No? So this is one very clear characteristic that was validated. So CEPs are social mission driven, and the significant segments of the poor that were covered by the social enterprises in the sample were the enterprising poor, farmers, agricultural workers, indigenous people, poor in urban and peri-urban communities, the unemployed and underemployed, and women cutting across these segments. I must say that we actually tried to survey also CEPs, serving persons with disability, but in terms of the overall number, it was very small. No? So we're talking here about the major segments of the poor served by the CEPs. Okay, so the other thing that we validated is CEPs are wealth-creating organizations with a distributive enterprise philosophy. Social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders, of course, are engaged in a sale of a wide array of products and services, and their revenues from sales are mainly what are used for sustaining their operations. No? This is true across all samples. And the profits or surplus are plowed back to provide additional services to the poor. So, when there are non-stock, non-profit corporations, of course, the profits are plowed back or used to finance non-fee-based services to the poor. If they're cooperatives, these are partly distributed as dividends to their members among the poor. But in terms of single proprietorships, partnerships, or stock-for-profit corporations, there are the research generated some samples of how redistribution was being done. And for example, in Gandang Kalikasan, Philippines, the workers are provided a living wage, not just minimum wage. When minimum wage is 450 or so, less in rural areas, they're paying the lowest paid worker in Gandang Kalikasan is being paid 750 pesos a day. And they're also practicing the plowing back of 100% of their profits from some of their best-selling products to partner communities. No? And of course, we know that this is also a practice of fair trade organizations, no? The plowing back of profits as fair trade premiums. The other thing is CEPs are hybrid organizations serving as agents of change in the markets and the economy. No? That's the other finding. They're vehicles for wealth creation and distribution in response to state and market failures to serve the needs of the poor. They straddle both market and non-market, profit and non-profit spheres of the economy. And they provide not just two types of services, because in the framework that I presented to you, I explained that there were two types of services, transactional and transformational. But in our research, we found out that there's a third type of service that's being provided by CEPs, which is social inclusion services. Let's go to through this one by one. What are transactional services? They are market-oriented. They assist the poor to become effective workers, suppliers, and clients, and they may be fee-based or non-fee-based. They include skills training, product development and marketing, financial services like savings, credit, and microinsurance. But the practice across countries varies widely. For example, in terms of trainings, in Bangladesh, no trainings are paid for by the poor. In the Philippines, less than 10% of the CEPs charge for trainings. No? So 90% don't charge, 10% charge for trainings. For loans, the big number of CEPs charge interest for loans. But there was actually a few who provide interest-free production loans to their partner producers. No? So it's not all the time. especially if they're dealing with partner producers, some SEPs actually provide interest-free loans. Transactional services of SEPs include financial services. So in Indonesia and Bangladesh, 42% of SEPs indicated that they provide that service. In the Philippines, 59% indicated the service, even if they were not all microfinance institutions. No? So across the various types of SEPs in the Philippines, they actually provide microfinance as well. Product development and training. In Indonesia, 17% provided such. In Bangladesh, 35%. In the Philippines, 53%. Provision of new and appropriate technology only was identified as a transactional service that was significant in the Philippines. No? 44% provided such. In terms of transformational services of SEPs, they enable the poor to overcome capability deprivation and become actors in their own development. What are these? Samples are organizing the poor into self-governing associations, leadership development, capacity building on gender issues. So these are some examples of transformational services. And there are two types. No? The first type is what we consider individually directed. These are an example of this would be scholarships, informal educational institutions, or enrollment in alternative learning systems. So for example, in CARD MRI, they actually provide the nanays alternative learning system opportunities, no? In order for them to graduate through graduate to high school, no? Or even scholarships in trainings for many other SEPs. But the other type of transformational service, which I think becomes very significant, is more significant, is the group-directed transformational service, which actually is what directs the this is directed at organizing the stakeholder group to become actors in their own development. So of course, an example would be cooperatives organizing and leadership development of these cooperatives. No? So many fair trade organizations actually do that. They organize cooperatives as their suppliers, and then they empower the cooperatives not only to become supplier communities, but they become mechanisms for community development. No? So here are, in terms of specifics, in training, capacity building, and skills development was provided by 78% in Bangladesh, SEPs, 69% in the Philippines, and 56% in Indonesia. Although, when we were trying to discern the data, we couldn't define which of these trainings were transactional and which of these trainings were transformational, no? Because of the way that the answers were actually structured. In terms of transformational services still, what we noted was in the Philippine SEP sample, notice that this was the developed SEP sample. No? 38% of the Philippine SEPs organize and develop self-governing institutions of the poor beyond the core organization of the social enterprise. No? So, they involve the poor in the planning process, and they provide for the poor's representation in the governance and management structures of the social enterprises. So 38% of the Philippine SEPs manifested this. The Philippine SEPs providing for the poor's participation in their planning processes was significant, even if it's just 38%, because when we looked at which types were providing, it cut across the different types, no? From the five that we were talking about, the mission-driven microfinance institutions, the social cooperatives, the trading development organizations, the fair trade organizations, as well as the new generation social enterprises. They all, I mean, there was at least one of these that was actually manifesting this. But in Indonesia, it was interesting that Sharia-based Indonesian MFIs and co-ops, which composed 30% of the Indonesian SEP sample, also promote participation of the poor in their planning process. So that was a significant finding as well. Okay, so we go to the social inclusion service. As I said, we were we were not consciously looking for this type of service, but it came out as something very significant. Social inclusion services of SEPs are non-fee-based social welfare services that directly assist the poor and their families to improve their quality of life now, no? To actually have immediate access to immediate needs now. And this, I think, is because of the failure of states and markets again. No? So social enterprises are coming in to actually provide a service that states and markets are unable to provide for them. And the ways that they are provided are, they sometimes are benefits to the poor and or their families who are their workers, suppliers, clients, and in the case of cooperatives, their members. They're sometimes provided as programs in the communities where the workers, suppliers, clients, and members reside. Sometimes the households are asked to provide counterpart and charges that to be agreed upon, or that's agreed upon to sustain the service. So for example, in the case of Lamak Cooperative in the Philippines, they actually charge services for the water, no, system that they have already installed. No? And then in some cases, local government units sustain part of the service. So these are examples of the social inclusion services across the 3 countries. Supplementary feeding programs for children, healthcare and education, worksite nursery facilities for working mothers, shelter homes for persons with disability, housing assistance for those affected by disasters, setting up community-based systems for water, health, sanitation, natural resource management, and disaster risk reduction. So what percentage of the SEPs in each of the countries provided social inclusion services? In Bangladesh, it was 48%. In the Philippines, it was 38%. In Indonesia, it was 22% of the SEPs. So a note on social inclusion and transformational services of SEPs. They are neither market-based nor market-driven, and they may be regarded as services in the public, not the private realm. They are financed from either the profits of the SEPs or the surplus of the SEPs in the case of cooperatives, or by a third party, usually public or private grants, including donations from companies practicing corporate social responsibility. And among the Philippine SEPs that were providing group-directed transformational services to the poor, it was significant that they were not directly providing social inclusion services. The 38% that I was talking about that were organizing the poor to become self-governing, it was the self-governing organizations of the poor that were actually engaging government and engaging the community to provide these social inclusion services. No? So that's a nuance. So on the roles, potentials, and challenges faced by social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders and support institutions, measurement of social outcomes, this favorite topic. No? The measurement of social outcomes is a major weakness of social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders. I think it's a common weakness of many that are involved in development work as a whole, and so is it with SEPs. It's a major weakness even among, whether they're evolving SEPs or developed SEPs, it's a weakness. The only difference is, in the developed sample of SEPs, 62% of Philippine SEPs consider it as one of the top 3 internal challenges faced. No? So among the evolving SEPs, they were not actually thinking of it as a problem. But among the developed SEPs in the Philippine sample, they were problematizing on impact measurement. And in the Philippines, 4 microfinance institutions have actually started to use the Progress Out of Poverty Index, as well as 1 new generation social enterprise has invested in social return on investment as a measure. So, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but the research could not effectively ascertain the SEP's qualitative impact on the poor over the past 5 to 10 years, and it could only get indications of positive outcomes on the poor as perceived by the CEOs or based on the reports of the SEPs themselves. No? So But, however, the outcome indicators that may be considered in developing social impact measurement tools for SEPs are many. No? I think we were able to gather quite a good number of, quite good data for us to start developing outcome indicators for social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders. And this came out to be the most significant. Improved and diversified and sustainable sources of incomes, improved self-esteem, self-image, self-worth, and self-confidence, improved position and participation in value chains and markets, improved position, participation, and voice in the community, improved access to social and community services, increase in assets, increased capacity to cover basic household needs and improve the quality of life of the poor, improved status of women in the community, increased capacity for self-governance and to contribute to community development, and movement out of poverty. So I think the SEPS sector in the Philippines, Bangladesh, Indonesia, and other countries could very well come up with impact indicators revolving around these outcomes. No? And it's a challenge to do it, but this is what the research was able to contribute to this discourse. In terms of the potential for scaling up, again, we look to the experience of developed SEPs in the Philippines. In terms of outreach, the current combined outreach of approximately 2.5 million was noted among the 32 SEPs that were surveyed. No? So among the 32 SEPs, their combined outreach was 2.5 million. If you compare this to the number of poor families in the Philippines, it actually represents a significant 30 to 60% of the poor in the Philippines, depending on whether you say there are 1 or 2 members of the poor in each family in the SEPs. No? But maybe we should nuance this because 90% of this is the outreach of microfinance institutions. No? So it's still the microfinance institutions that have the biggest outreach. 88% of the SEPs indicated that they would have a target increase of outreach of 500 to 1.5 million. No? So in the next 5 years. This is also interesting in terms of asset size. When we looked at the median asset base of the Philippine SEPs when they were established, it was micro. In 2012, the median size of their assets was already medium. No? So I think that's significant in terms of the growth of the SEPs in the developed sample. So here are common external challenges faced by SEPs that came out in the survey. Government policies negatively affecting social enterprises. Industry and market practices negatively affecting social enterprises. Inadequacy of programs supporting social enterprise development. And corruption in government regulatory bodies. No? And in the Philippines in particular, the #1 external challenge that was identified as faced by the Philippines is extreme weather disturbances. Maybe that's because of the recent events in the Philippines, no, and the nature of the SEP sample that was covered. But that came out as the #1. And then, in terms of internal challenges, these were the main internal challenges that were faced. Access to adequate financing, so that's still very important. Capacity development among leaders, managers, and people. Effective and efficient management and operations to meet the volume and quality requirements of markets, including access to appropriate technologies. And again, among the Philippine SEP sample, the #1 internal challenge that was posed is access to appropriate technologies. No? Maybe because they're also developed SEPs and they're wanting to grow and are needing appropriate technologies. Okay, in terms of financing, and this is very interesting also because in terms of financing at setup and to sustain their operations, SEPs used a mix of resources for setting up and to finance their services to the poor. Majority of the SEPs finance their operations from internally generated funds, no? In terms of profits, surplus, and revenues from sales. At setup, the common sources were personal and institutional investments of founders, owners, and grants from development agencies or social investors. And grants were also used to finance a part of the services to the poor in Bangladesh. And 87% of the SEPs surveyed received grants in Bangladesh. So, in terms of organizational development process among SEPs, this was interesting. Among Philippine social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders, which is our developed sample, 25% have become multi-organizational systems. They combine stock for-profit corporations and non-stock, non-profit corporations as forms. And we have observed that they do this because of two reasons. It's a way to manage the provision of different types of products and services, because transactional services, transformational services, and social inclusion services have very different delivery systems. No? So for example, foundations or the non-stock non-profits are usually the ones that provide the transformational and the social inclusion services, whereas the transactional services are provided for by the stock for-profit company side. No? But it's also a way of managing the revenue mix to include receipt of grants for social inclusion and transformational services. Because many times, it's not enough, no? The profits and the surplus coming from the SEPs, it's not enough for them to provide adequate transformational and social inclusion services to their members or to their stakeholders. In terms of women economic leadership, a big number of the SEP's outreach are marginalized or socially and economically challenged women, particularly in the Philippines and to a certain extent in Bangladesh. But they remain a minority among SEPs in the Indonesian sample, at least those that were surveyed. Microfinance institutions, which have the most outreach among SEPs, engage most of the women in a transactional way, and address mainly access to a specific type of economic resource, which is financial, and which is just part of the first element of the women economic leadership. No? So, women in leadership and management positions in SEPs, again, this was interesting. In the Philippines, women were positioned better, if not almost at par with men, in leadership positions in social enterprises. It's less so in Bangladesh, but still significant. But it's relatively low, a percentage in Indonesia. Only a handful of social enterprises have conscious gender and development or WELL perspective, and as a cross-cutting WELL program or plan. No? So in terms of a conscious gender and development perspective, even if, for example, many microfinance institutions serve women, there's no conscious gender and development program. This weakness needs to be effectively addressed by the emerging sector of SEPs and their support institutions. However, we noted also that for the WELL framework to effectively reflect an agenda for the empowerment of marginalized women in developing countries, there may be a need to better incorporate the perspective of SEPs as hybrid organizations, traversing both the market and non-market spheres of the economy, and the perspective of building ethical or fair markets and a plural economy. Because we've noted that in the formulation of the WELL framework, it's really a power in markets. No? There's no qualification. And it does not talk, well, it's not explicit about a plural economy. In terms of partnerships of SEPs with civil society, state, and business, the main partners of SEPs in the Philippines were mainly civil society organizations and other social enterprises. And this was surprising because even for financing and marketing services, they were partnered with civil society organizations mainly. In Bangladesh, most of the SEPs were mainly relating to partners that are NGOs or project donors, and it's mainly related to funding. No? In Indonesia, there's no dominant partner, but there's a relatively low level of partnership with government, civil society, and business organizations. I think around 1/4, if I'm not mistaken. On the whole, there's much room for scaling up partnerships with all sectors to create greater impact on the poor. No? All right, let me now go to the last point, which is actually the recommendations for our agenda building process. So the first recommendation is to build a strong learning community among SEPs and support institutions to systematically address the key internal and external challenges faced by SEPs. And the core program of such a learning community should include knowledge creation, capacity development, learning exchange, and partnership building between and among SEPs and support institutions across countries. We thought that it was enriching actually to look at how sharing can be done across countries. It's also of note that a learning community within and between countries in Asia is central if we are to harness the potential of increased partnerships with other sectors. We have to get our act together as a sector, and we need to learn more from each other before we can effectively engage on a scaled-up level, civil society, state, and market institutions in the region. Of course, these are not mutually exclusive, no? We can be strengthening ourselves while actually calibrating our engagements with the other sectors. The second recommendation is to develop an enhanced WELL framework towards transforming markets and economies to inform the building of a vibrant SEP sector. This has actually two elements. It's not just about WELL, but it's about the framework of understanding social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders. Towards building a vibrant sector of SEPs, all stakeholders have to have a paradigm shift in understanding SEPs. Usually, when we talk about social enterprises and SEPs, we are actually relegated as part of the small, micro, medium enterprises, no? But this research, I think, provides proof that SEPs need to be treated differently as ordinary micro, small, and medium enterprises because they're different. SEPs are hybrid rather than purely market for-profit institutions. SEPs are agents of change in markets and in building plural economies, and generally actually are advocating ethical markets and actually are advocating the principles of redistribution and reciprocity. So they're agents of change in markets and building a plural economy rather than ordinary micro, small, and medium enterprises. And as such, SEPs need to be assisted differently from micro, small, and medium enterprises. SEPs need to be nurtured and assisted to provide a combination of market and non-market services, a combination of the transactional, transformational, and the social inclusion services, and to address the unfavorable market or state practices and policies, SEPs need to be supported to build platforms, no, for innovation and change. And this should also be reflected in the conception of the WELL framework and program for social enterprises, so that we are actually proposing reformulation of the second element of WELL to reflect these elements, no? From gaining power in markets to building power in ethical markets and to transform economies, no? Something like that. It's not the exact formulation, but it's in terms of developing strategic partnership between SEPs and civil society, actually, social inclusion and transformational services are the strength of civil society organizations. But many civil society organizations no longer have funding. Yan. The proposal is for SEPs to actually build strategic partnerships with civil society organizations, and it would go a long way in delivering more of these services to a majority of the SEP stakeholders among the poor, rather than the SEPs building their own capability for transformational services and for social inclusion services. There are many civil society organizations which have built their expertise along these lines, especially given that MFIs and co-ops, which is a big segment of SEPs, and new generation social enterprises, a growing segment of SEPs, may not have the internal capabilities to deliver this to all of their stakeholders. Strategic partnerships between civil society organizations are crucial in order for us to scale up impact in terms of depth. And civil society organizations could also benefit from revenue streams from such partnerships to become more sustainable, because it's really the microfinance institutions and the cooperatives that have shown a relative level of sustainability. No? In terms of partnerships with government and business towards scaling up of impact, the recommendation is to pursue transformational partnerships between SEPs, government, and business towards scaling up impact on the poor. And this is premised on the recognition of SEPs as change agents and hybrid organizations seeking to transform the lives of the poor. So I think it's important that we dialogue with government and business so that they understand us better. And government and business institutions, however, also need to be willing to change the policies and practices that have not worked in favor of the poor. No, because these policies and practices are what marginalize the poor to begin with, no? From state and market services. No? So unless there's also a willingness on the part of government and business to change policies and practices that have not worked in favor of the poor, this is not change, supporting SEPs will not happen effectively. And there's a need for strategic innovations to support the scaling up of SEPs. In relation to linking up with the business community, when we talk about linking between social enterprises and inclusive business, no, inclusive businesses engage the poor as workers in a transactional way, suppliers and clients. No? They say, it's not CSR. No? They're very clear about that. It's not CSR. It's strategic partnership, no? But it's very transactional. Our proposal is for business organizations to consider linking their CSR program so that SEPs are able to deliver transformational and social inclusion services to the poor. So the transactional relationship is fine, but it can be much more powerful if their corporate social responsibility programs are actually directed at providing transformational and social inclusion services to the poor. So strategic partnership with business organizations such as inclusive businesses and impact investment platforms could also go one step further by developing a more comprehensive support program for SEPs. A note on impact investment platforms. We've noted, for example, in India, no? They did a study of what the impact investment platform is supporting, and there's a segment called Impact First Social Enterprises. Many impact investment platforms are supporting social enterprises of a variety of types. But SEPs are impact first social enterprises. No? SEPs are there for social impact, and in order to be effective, they need to be sustainable. No? So for impact investment platforms to be effective in supporting SEPs, they will need to consider this in developing an ecosystem of support that could provide the support that SEPs need to grow and develop. No? So it's not just about transactional services again. No? It's a combination of our transactional partnerships. There has to be a transformational partnership in the process dedicated to overcoming poverty. The second to the last slide, the other recommendation is to set up and support strategic platforms to enable and build an ecosystem of support for SEPs as major vehicles for innovation and poverty reduction. To create impact, partnerships between SEPs, civil society, government, and business cannot be single relationships between SEPs and business, SEPs and government agencies. It has to be multilateral, multi-sectoral partnerships and platforms. No? And it cannot just be single project engagements, but strategic platforms for innovation and change. And I think this is where, in the Philippines, there has actually been 2 platforms set up that shows how this can be done. In the Philippines, there are 2 platforms: the Poverty Reduction through Social Entrepreneurship Coalition, which is lobbying for a poverty reduction through social entrepreneurship bill in Congress, And there's also a platform called Reconstruction Initiative through Social Enterprise in response to the Haiyan affected areas. So it's platforms like this that would provide innovation and change, critical to support SEPs to grow and develop, and not just single relationships between SEPs and business organizations or SEPs and government agencies. Finally, SEPs and their support institutions in each country or sub-region could define what platforms would be appropriate, no? Given your specific contexts. So the Philippine case is there, of course, but other countries might have to develop platforms that would be more appropriate given their contexts. Last is the co-creation of a vibrant social enterprise with the poor as primary stakeholder sector as key actor in a post-2015 development agenda and process. This is, I think, the main proposal that we are putting forward in terms of framing the proposals, because we all know about the Millennium Development Goals, and we all know that in South and Southeast Asia and many other developing countries, the Millennium Development Goals will not be achieved effectively, no, to a big extent. But despite this, the UN panel of eminent experts that have come together to actually discuss the Sustainable Development Goals have upped the ante and have called not only for poverty reduction in the post-2015 development agenda, but they're calling for transforming economies. They're calling for poverty elimination. They're calling for gender equality by 2030. I think that's a golden opportunity for us in the sector of growing SEPs in Asia to actually offer development of the SEP sector as a key strategy to help to work with government and business to achieve the sustainable development goals in our part of the world, which is home to 2/3 of the world's poorest. Thank you very much.